Hi, good evening. A very warm welcome to everyone joining in for our first uh, webinar for the year 2024. Wish you all a very, very happy new year. I hope you had a very nice, warm celebration with your family and loved ones, and you're back to work now. And we at the Outreach Collective are also back to work. It's not that far that we had our annual retreat, we had our annual celebrations. But I was just talking to Bhakti. It feels like 10 days feel like ages when we are not on our weekly Zoom calls or doing information sessions and hosting distinguished guests with us like we do today in Vardan Kabra. I am very, very honored to invite Vardan for our first book talk of the year. Vardan Kabra is the co-founder and head of school at Fountainhead School, and he has written a very, very fascinating book. I remember when I posted about us being able to host him as our first guest for 2024. And in the past, as you remember, last year we hosted some very, very distinguished personalities, right from Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar, the founding vice chancellor at OP Jindal Global University, to authors, to educationists, school principals. And I think what resonates with us with this book is what we have been trying to put across as a community, the objective for the Indian higher education revamp. And when Vardhan says reimagining Indian education, India needs a revolution in education and reforms won't do. He's actually striking a chord with all of us because that is what we all also believe as a community. And I'm speaking on behalf of the 300 plus the Outreach Collective members that I represent as the co-founder along with Bhakti Shah. Uh, and so we are going to talk about his book. We are going to talk about Vardhan is a very well known face in the Indian education space. He has been a revolutionary in himself. The Fountainhead schools are known as trendsetters, schools that have reimagined the way education can be done, in spite of all the odds that may be in front of us. So I'll just first like to briefly formally introduce him, and then we'll jump right into the questions. Vardhan Kabra is the head of school at Fountainhead School. He's also the co-founder there. He is a BTech and MTech from IIT Mumbai. He has a postgraduate diploma from IIM Ahmedabad. He co-founded Fountainhead School preschool with Ankita. He has led the operations of Fountainhead School in Surat since its inception in 2008. He is responsible for the overall academics and administration of the school. The teacher training and leadership development program at Fountainhead are closely monitored by him. He ensures that innovative pedagogy and student-centric education is brought into classroom practice through constant training and mentoring of teachers. Apart from that, in my previous role as the director for admissions and outreach at OP Jindal Global University, and before that as head of international outreach for Ashoka University, we always, Surat is that part of the country that not many of us get to visit, but Fountainhead School in Surat was the school that everybody knew that this is the school that is of at par with any global school. And I am speaking on behalf of, I've personally traveled to 35 plus countries, 1,000 plus schools to have that name at such a short interval. I mean, it's not a legacy school; it's a new school. 10 years is not a big time in the life of a school, but to have that so speaks volume about the founders. And the student quality that we used to get from Fountainhead was amazing. And every year we used to get students from Fountainhead School joining us, both at Jindal and at Shoka. So I'm very, very honored to have Vardhan with us here today. We are going to talk about reimagining Indian education, his new book. And I'm joined by Bhakti, who is my co-founder. She will also be chiming in the conversation as and when it comes to that. But Vardhan, very warm welcome to this. I mean, I would like to begin not with your book, but I would like to start from your first baby, which is the Fountainhead Preschool, and then subsequently the school along with your wife Ankita that you co-founded. I mean, what were the gaps you were trying to address, and as I think about it, I mean, as I said in my initial remarks also, Surat is not in everybody's mind when they think of innovative schools. It is always Bombay, Bangalore, or Delhi, or some other place. So if you could just start from there, and then we'll subsequently move ahead.
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Ankur and Bhakti, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here to speak to, progressive educators, people who, whether it's in school or in higher education. I think the Outreach Collective is sparking many interesting conversations. I had an opportunity to go through some of the older videos that have been recorded over the last year, and I really found those conversations fascinating. So thank you. Let me start by answering the question about why Fountainhead Preschool or School. I think there are two parts of it. One of it is that uh, I grew up in multiple schools. I studied in multiple schools across India. My father was in a transferable job. Due to that, we were moving every 2 3 years. And my experience with education was such that I always felt that there was something lacking in education. Uh, I was a good student, but I was still not enjoying it. There were only very small things that I would enjoy, and in fact, my most memorable educational experiences came outside of school, like in an internship that I did in uh, the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics in Pune. I did a project for like 2 months there, and I really enjoyed that because it was so much more hands-on. That was really enjoyable. I mean, and that's where I really enjoyed maths and science, and I was good at maths and science. That's how I also ended up in engineering, but I didn't enjoy the maths and science which we would be doing in school. So that was a significant driving factor to for me to think that okay, we need to change the way we look at education. It needs to be both meaningful and joyful. So that was trigger one, and the second was just coming from maybe an environment where I just wanted to do something on my own rather than take up a job. So I think those were the two driving factors to start a school. I think it happened in Surat as a choice. Both Ankita is my batchmate from Ahmedabad, and I don't have any roots in Surat. But we were looking at essentially tier two cities instead of tier one cities because we didn't have a lot of we didn't have essentially funding we didn't have. So we to start a school in a metro would have been a much more of a task for us to figure out, I mean, the land and the funding for it. So that's essentially the reason why we're looking at tier two. We did look at a bunch of other places. We looked at Jaipur and Navi Mumbai and Chandigarh and Ludhiana and Jaipur and Indore. Like we actually visited, researched, spoke to people, uh,
Wow.
and then based on that we decided on Surat because for two three factors. One, economically, it was doing really well. This is in 2003 2004. It's still doing quite well, so that's been a good decision in hindsight. And educationally it didn't have a lot of good opportunities for students and parents, so those were like two reasons which prompted us to be in Surat. And we were in Ahmedabad right before this, so that also made it easier for us to understand the context and be here in Surat.
Interesting. That is very, very interesting. So you actually uh did look out. I seriously thought
Market
you had some
research,
family roots and
yeah,
everything there, and that's why you went to Surat. But this is very interesting. So you did quite a bit of market research, and then you finalized
correct.
Surat as a location, because setting up a school in India is quite a Herculean task in itself, right? You need to follow a lot of I mean, it's substantial investment also to set up. I
Right,
mean, I'm assuming, because in TOC, the running dream is that someday we will have our own school. We are registered as a society. So
right.
sometimes we talk with the community members and say we think of starting a school of our own, maybe a TOC school, because a lot of us are the same. But that is so inspiring to know. So I mean, just a side question to this. I mean, how long did you take time to do your market research and survey and then finalize Surat? I mean, what was
It
the
took
project
about a
timeline?
year. In fact, the second year at IIM Ahmedabad, we spent a lot of time in doing this. We had a course called Laboratory for Entrepreneurial Motivation. It's run by Professor Sunil Handa, who is who is an IMA alumni and was a visiting faculty for this course. He's an entrepreneur himself, and he runs this school called Eklavya School in Ahmedabad. Some of you may have heard about the school.
We have heard about the school, yeah,
Yeah, some of
Eklavya.
you. Yeah, it's almost 25 years old now. So
Okay.
I think that was one of the starting points to in terms of research. And then Ankita and I also did a one credit course with the RJM Center of Education and Innovation at IIM Ahmedabad. We did a one credit course there on studying innovative schools in India. So we actually, as a part of that, we actually visited 25 odd schools at that point of time, and to understand what is happening in India. So that
Wow.
whole year we spent in like doing research and talking to people, understanding what is happening. It was not. I have to say that education was not the only thing we were looking at that point. At least in the start of that second year, we were.
Mm-hmm.
We said, okay, let's look at all possible options of what we could be doing, and then distribution and retailing and manufacturing were all possibilities. But education, because of the background I mentioned about myself being wanting to do something in education, wanting to make a difference there, and the encouragement and mentorship of Professor Sunil Handa both helped us to make that decision that okay, this is the best time to do something as risky as this is when we are young and fresh out of college.
You
Vardhan, I
know,
have to say this. Sorry, I have to jump in as
yeah,
the
yeah, go
name
ahead.
Ahmedabad. So I did my very early schooling in Ahmedabad. And interestingly enough, a lot of parents at that time were realizing that the Gujarat education system was really not good enough because there were mass promotions happening because of multiple challenges in the state. And I remember I was put in boarding school in Mount Abu, and which is a very popular
Yeah.
destination for a lot of us Gujaratis in Ahmedabad and around. But at that time, there was hardly a few schools like Sant Kabir, for example, who were
Yeah.
around. And I really wish that we had a fountainhead back then in Ahmedabad because the options were so few. But as a Gujarati and as someone, as a native of the state, I cannot thank you enough for what you've done with Fountainhead because it is a very aspirational school, especially in a state like Gujarat, and came at a very, very important time when families were giving up on the quality of education in the state. So, phenomenal work there. And I have one question, Ankur, if you allow me.
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
How did you envision the international curriculum as a curriculum of choice for Fountainhead?
Yeah, I think that would be the natural next question. How did we come up with international curriculum? So we started off running the preschool first. I mean, in 2005. So like between 2004 is when we graduated. Between 2004 and 5, we again took a year to understand Surat and dig deeper into education, understanding what is good education. We of course didn't have a degree in education, so we used that time to understand good practices. Between Ankita and I, we read multiple books, did some courses. I mean, it wasn't a time of online courses so much, so it was like physical courses at that point. And then, as so, we started with the preschool. We hadn't decided on which curriculum we would do once we set up a school. But in that process of the next 3 years or so, we were able to understand what is it that we want from education, and then we started looking around as to which board of education seems to meet that so I'll put it this way. I mean, we wanted something which is student centered, where you're learning skills, and you're learning with inquiry rather than learning rote memorizing information and giving examinations, which is how most of our education has been. It is the NEP brings in a bunch of changes. There's no doubt, but the implementation, at least as a policy, the implementation is another matter. Uh, so the IB came out to be the closest from what we could understand. I would also say that it was we had limited understanding of what IB also means because there were barely 20 odd schools in India in 2003, 4, 5. And when we started off with the PYP program, which is the primary years program, there were only 12, 13 schools in India at that point, and all of them were in metros, is what I would think. Is what I remember. I mean, broadly. maybe one or two in like Nashik or some such places. So I think the IB curriculum was a big draw, from the whole inquiry philosophy to the student centeredness, assessments being very multifaceted, not just exams and quizzes, but you have a range of assessments, performances, and process based, journal based. All of those things were a big draw for us.
And when you, I mean, Vardhan, I think in my homework about you and the school work that you have done at the Fountainhead School, I mean, two words keep coming, repeating themselves. I mean, education should be meaningful and joyful, and you
Yeah.
just touched upon that. I mean, if
Yes.
you could just elaborate, what exactly when you say meaningful and joyful, and that is exactly what we lament that students go to. And I am telling you this, when I go to a school, do a session, and I have done quite a few of them, the first question that I ask in any top school, be it in India, abroad, is how many of you love coming to school on a Monday?
Yeah.
And sadly, I mean, 8 out of 10 hands don't go up. And they're like, and I'll say, how many of you love going to school, not coming to school, being on a weekend? And
Yeah.
8 hands will go up. And I
Yeah.
tell the students, if, and there are teachers in front and everybody, the principal is there. And I say, and these are the top schools of the country. I will go to the best schools. So when you say meaningful and joy, it strikes a chord with me and the community, because that is what we are struggling with. If 10 years, 11, 50 teenagers don't feel good going to school, they don't feel meaningful, they don't feel joyful, then what's the purpose of education, right? So if you can just tell, share your experience of how you make
So
school meaningful and joyful at Fountainhead.
absolutely. So let me just this is a question that I like. You ask students question, I ask parents questions when they come in, and they're looking for admission at our school, or anyone who's looking at reimagining or rethinking education. Uh, I mean, we do so much content, but in terms of okay, let's take the example that I take in the book. Like, we would all have studied quadratic equations in school. It's the equation which is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, and there
Yeah.
are 4 or 5 different methods of solving it. Now, my question is not whether you know how to solve it. If you're not a maths teacher or probably a physics teacher, you would not be you would not be able to solve it at this point. Also, straightforward. I mean, that's not something most of us would be able to do. But more importantly, what we've never learned the application of it either. We don't know where it is applied. We've just learned it because it was in the textbook, because our teacher was teaching it, because it was going to come in exam as an important 5 marks, 10 marks, whatever number of marks it was going to be about. And this holds true for much of the concepts or content. I wouldn't say concepts, I would say content that we have done, especially after grade 5 or 6. I mean, I can take a more simpler example from maths and talk about, okay, and then maybe I don't know if you have a hand raise system, but let me see if anyone has used a square root in the last 5 years of their life. Uh, uh, just for any other than teaching your kids, if you have kids, or or teaching in school, you've not even used a square root. And the problem is that there is so much content, and this is not just about math. Of course, if we talk about more traditional subjects of history and geography and civics, but even science is all memorized, and you just go and give exams based on, okay, what's the definition of photosynthesis, or memorizing the periodic table and its properties, and just giving those answers. Now, all of that basically means that when students are learning all this, they don't see the connect of what they're learning with what is useful in real life. They don't see that connect. They are able to also, and as students, all of us have probably asked that question, that okay, why am I learning this really? I mean, is it going to be of any use to me? And then most of us, and teachers really, most typical answer is because it's there in the syllabus, because it's there in the textbook, it's there in the curriculum. Now, that is not a convincing answer, especially for teenagers. uh, the primary kids will just do it because, well, they are still not asking those critical questions. They are happy to learn whatever you're teaching them. They don't find necessarily joyfulness necessarily in that, because the moment it is just for the sake of doing it, then you're not okay. If you're learning, say, something as simple as LCM and HCF in maths, again, least common multiple, highest common fraction has very little application beyond learning maths. And if you are unable to make those connections of real life applications of why you're learning something, then students don't find joy or meaning in that. Okay, so the meaning part is not coming there. The joy part comes from the method, the pedagogy. I mean, is it inquiry based or is it rote memorization? Are you doing hands-on stuff, or are you just memorizing it for the sake of the answer? So now that's where the joyfulness and the meaningfulness comes in, where you bring in a lot more hands-on, bring in experiential learning, and wherever possible, or at least most of the time, you're making connections with real life. Where is this going to be used? Why are you learning this? And that's how we can, and that's how we attempt to bring in joy and meaning into the classroom.
Amazing. Wonderful. Wonderful to know that. I think that's the most important thing. And connected to this is my next question. And we are now coming to the book. You are already doing fantastic work at the school, and you could have, uh, done a lot of other things, but you chose to also write a book about your experiences. So, how did the idea of writing this big book come along? And then obviously, who do you think should read this book, and who is the right audience that will benefit from this book?
So the idea of writing the book was essentially there from quite some time. Also because my whole purpose of getting into education was to make a difference. Starting a school, running it was a big step, a big part of that journey. But now my next thought was, after doing it for maybe 10, 12 years or almost 13, 14 years, okay, how can I reach out to a larger audience, communicate, some ideas. It's not necessarily that I have the best ideas or we're doing everything perfectly. I don't think we're anywhere near that. But at least there are some learnings that I think that I can share, and that's where the intent of writing the book comes from. And then if you and I can assure you that if you read the book, you would be able to connect to pretty much everything that's there. You would say, oh yeah, I have also experienced this, I've also seen this. Even if you're not a teacher, you would have seen it, experience the same thing as a student, or even as a someone who's associated with education very closely in non-teaching roles. So you would be able to connect very well, and you would say, yeah, this makes a lot of sense and we need to be changing this. The problem is that we don't know where to change it and how to go in that direction. That's where we get stuck. Which is what so the first part is about problems, and the second part is about possible solutions. Again, definitely not the best solutions or the only solutions, but definitely one direction that can be taken. So that's the thought process behind the book. And I think so. Given that context, I feel that I feel that anyone who's very closely associated with education should definitely read it. Parents would also benefit, but it may get a little heavy for parents after a certain point, because it's meant for people who are in the education sector, teachers, counselors, of course, anyone who's related to education.
Amazing, thank you. And I've shared the Amazon link or the book in the chat, and I'm also sharing the screen. I hope you can see it. It's highly rated. I can see 4.7 stars, 24 ratings. And I definitely have ordered my own copy after we set up this interview process and the conversation, because the moment I went through the index and I went through the summary of the book, and then I read some reviews about your book, everybody is exactly saying the same thing, that all of us have experienced the challenges that you have mentioned here in some part or the other, either in full or in some part, and we feel so connected what you're trying to do. But Vardhan, and you are a very very well known face now with Fountainhead School, uh, and we are talking about a lot of issues with our education system, but there are two aspects to it also. There is a good and there is a bad. Before we come to the challenges, also like to talk to you about what do you think are I mean the strengths of the Indian education system, because Uh, One of the things that I feel is we lament about our Indian education system is rote learning. We say, oh, we are always about rote learning, rote learning, rote learning. But when we travel in the West, they have their own challenges where they feel that there are students. I mean, I'm going talking from my own experience. They feel that our children are not good at rote learning, and we need some of that also. So I mean, there is a balance that needs to be strike. I mean, I'm coming from a liberal arts background. I work with Ashoka and
Yeah,
Jindal talking
yeah,
about liberal arts all the way. But when I used to travel to US and Canada and these places,
yeah,
they were like, "Oh, Indians are so good at being doctors and engineers." And I mean, all of you are like IT professionals there, or you work like CEO of Microsoft or Google CEO, and they see these poster boys of IT tech, and then you go to US, all the doctors are Indians, most of them, and UK and all these places, and they feel that that's good because our children here in the West are not taking the heavy subjects, which is like maths and science, and they are going for the thought of social science subjects, which are much more easier in their own understanding. So, what do you think are the good things that we are trying to do here at Indian education?
So I know you sent me this question. I had to think really hard about this.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, and the reason for it is not that. Okay, let me put it this way: that one, there is a public education and there is a private education. Let's put it this way in India. Uh, as far as K-12 is concerned, public education is well behind all parameters that it needs to be. So it's difficult to say anything good. And I'm not talking about higher education. There are fantastic higher education institutes which are public educations. I have been to two of them, so obviously there are fantastic ones. I mean that are there. But as far as K-12 is concerned, public education is nowhere near up to mark, and there are states which are trying to do some things, but they're still well behind. And we have nearly 50 to 55% of our kids still go there. So let's also be clear
Hmm.
about of the remaining, so 45% or so, most of the kids are studying in schools are essentially what are called budget private schools, or which serve low income families. And again, for them, if they can just get to foundational literacy and numeracy, do that well, I think that's a big achievement. That also is something that they do struggle with. So when we talk about at a scale, uh, I wouldn't find much to say that okay, we've been doing something really well. That's something that that's my honest, I mean, and strong opinion on that particular point. Yes, we have a lot of, because we also operate at scale, there are obviously good quality private institutions which have been there for a long time. Some of our curriculum also has been, because it has been grounded strongly in, I wouldn't say only in the maths and science, but even in other subjects. But there is those students who are able to do well, are also able to progress well, whether it is in engineering, medical, IT, or so many other fields that Indians are good at. Uh, but I would also say that much of the excellence that we see in the corporate world or even in the academic world is uh, in spite or despite of the education. It is not thanks to the education. Obviously, when there are, I mean, at this point today, CBSE alone, there are 10 to 12 lakh students giving the 12th examinations each year. And if you look at all students giving 12th examinations, we're talking about a very, very large number. I, I remember, I think it's 2-3 crores if I remember correctly. Now in that number, obviously we are going to have very smart people who are going to go and become, who are going to become very good engineers. See, when we say very good engineers, also let us be clear that most people coming from the IITs don't do engineering, right? All of us
Yeah, yeah,
all of us
absolutely. Yeah.
already know that they're not really doing engineering. They are all in. They're doing
They are
everything.
becoming stand-up comics, Vardan.
Also,
Yeah.
but they're
Also.
doing everything else except engineering. So now it's not, the institutions is not what is contributing. Obviously, when the funnel is so competitive, you are going to find, I mean, very good people coming out of that funnel in any case. So that is not surprising to me. And there are, as I said, public institutions. There are very good ones which do a good job when it comes to higher education. So there is obviously they've made a name for Indian education and for themselves. But that does not reflect greatly on the the education itself is what I can say. And I can also say, I mean, and as you said, you've been to so many foreign universities. I agree. Foreign schools. I'm not saying that what someone else is doing is perfect. I don't think there are pretty much every education system in the world is struggling in some way or the other. We are struggling at scale. We're struggling with foundational literacy, numeracy. They're struggling with purpose. They're struggling with keeping students motivated to study. STEM is definitely a struggle area for them. So you're right. I mean, I don't think there is a perfect system, but these are just some thoughts that I have.
Vardhan, very interestingly, you mentioned the diversity of challenges depending on which country. And in a country like India, it's not even about the country; it's about the state or the very local area that you cater to.
Correct.
And unless you're a boarding school, you are going to have to look at the community around you to make sure that your school is actually making an impact and is meeting the needs of the community around you or filling the gaps. We've seen a phenomenal rise in the number of private universities in India. And so it seems like a lot of entrepreneurs or businessmen or politicians with deep pockets are choosing to invest in higher education. Do you think that we are seeing enough investment in K-12 in quality schools? And as an entrepreneur yourself in the space, what is your view on the current volume with respect to the demand of quality of education? And what is your advice to anyone who can think in that direction or who should potentially think of starting a school?
Yeah. Ankur, can we also connect this with the question that you have on drawing of lots? I mean, because it's a very for
Yeah,
IIT.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can do that. I mean, that was our next question.
Correct.
I
Correct.
mean, you suggested, for those of you who may not know, I mean, I loved when I was doing my research in one of the blog posts that Vardhan has written. He says that, a lot of the issues, the mental health issues, the student suicide problems that are happening with some very bright students committing suicide, and we know we are very passionate about the same issue. We have been talking over and over again. I mean, the stress on students, the quota factory, we know it all. And then he had a very interesting take on it. And he said, probably have an all India entrance examination for the first 200,000 rank holders. You draw lots, and then depending on the lots, you allocate IIT seats to the students and not on merit. It's just a lottery system. And that was very interesting take. And I had put it down specifically as our next question here. Over to you, Vardhan. I mean, I've set the context and then you can add.
So the reason I'm putting that question here is also because there is obviously a big, huge mismatch between the demand and the supply for high quality higher education, good quality higher education. That's the reason why there is so much craze and madness about the JEE and the NEET. Let's be honest, it is not that people, parents or their kids want to become engineers or doctors at any cost. It is because that's the route that they see to success in life. And this is especially true for anyone who does not have the means to be in a good quality progressive private university. Some of those which I'm sure many of those which you represent here, including the ones Bhakti mentioned. So I have no doubts that there is a huge mismatch between the supply and demand. And I don't think we are anywhere close to the kind of investment and the numbers of both higher ed as well as private schools that are required in terms of new good quality ones. So uh, and the reason why and I think there is regulation is a big problem. There is no doubt that regulation is a huge issue. Education is still meant to be non-profit in India, higher education or K-12 education, and which is why the investment does not come from, say, a corporate. I mean, so much it comes from the kind of people that Bhakti mentioned, builders and politicians, and people with deep pockets who can also manage the regulatory aspects much better. There are some, but Ashoka is an example, ISB is another example, and many OP Jindal, of course, and so many others. But there are very few of these. We need hundreds more of these institutions to be serving our students. And I think a simple statistic that I came across, which shows the supply demand gap, is that Indian students are spending about upwards of $40 billion annually on education abroad. Uh, and I just and the comparison of that is best made with our fuel import bill. Our fuel import bill for the same year is about $120 billion. Now, our students on education abroad, we are spending one third of our fuel import bill. Now, that's the extent to which we lack good education. If we had those opportunities in India, so many more students would remain in India. So I think that's just the broader point I wanted to make here.
Interesting. Absolutely. I mean, there are a couple of questions that I want to ask. I mean, there are more than couple, but I also want to go into the audience Q&A because there are
Yeah.
quite a few questions that have come beforehand. So audience, if you have a question, you can please use raise hand option, or you can type in your questions. I will take in the questions that we have already got on the chat box. I mean, I have one question from Shweta Khanna. My question to Vardhan will be specific best practices adopted at Fountainhead to make education meaningful and joyful. I mean, if you can just share a couple of practices best practices that you can, practical tips that you can give to the audience.
So I'll talk about two things. While there are maybe many, I mean, I couldn't talk about 20-25 things, but I'll just talk about two specific things for now. One of the things that we are now doing, especially in the last 5-6 years, a lot more, is to move towards project-based learning, at least from like grade 3 onwards. And it's not going to be exclusively project-based learning. It is also going to be project-based learning, and the difference between, and I know that a lot of schools or a lot of educators are familiar with project based learning, but one big difference is that uh, when we talk about project based learning, the project is not the dessert at the end of a typical unit. The project is the main course in that sense. That's the analogy that people who are familiar with project based learning would use, where the project is trying to address a authentic real life problem, or where students are trying to find a solution to a real life issue that they can identify and work around it. And then an example of it could be that, okay, students in our school identified the need of a greenhouse because there are certain vegetables and flowers that do not grow in the weather of Surat. Then they decided to put together a greenhouse, and they studied the biology and the chemistry and the physics of setting up a greenhouse and put it together. So that's one example. The other thing which I think all of you will be able to relate to very well is we do something called change the narrative, especially once students enter grade 8, grade 9. And we do this whole process with parents and students and teachers and ask them that, okay, what are your real goals in life? Do not just be driven by grades and marks. Uh, that okay, without a certain grade in a certain subject, or certain subjects altogether, you're not going to be successful. Because, and we do this exercise with parents and ask them to list what are the attributes or characteristics of people who they know are successful in life. And all of those characteristics and attributes are 21st century skills and attitudes like leadership and teamwork and vision and dedication, all of these things. uh, no one no one says that you need to have 90% marks or a grade A or a 42 or whatever it is to be successful in life. Yes, university admissions do require a certain grade, and that also, but there is a whole range of university. It's not that there is only one sort of universities. uh, but is that your dream, is that your goal, is that the only route to success for you in life? If that is something that we can talk about to parents and students effectively, a lot of their stress, a lot of their mental health issues becomes less. It doesn't go away, because obviously that whole period of admissions is stressful as a whole. But at least you know that there are so many more routes to success in life and not just narrow paths to success.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vardhan. I see Kala has raised her hand. Kala, you want to go ahead?
Thanks, Ankur. Hi, Vardan. Of course, I've delved into different aspects of your book, and this, of course, there's multiple questions, but let's kind of prioritize. There's two things I want to kind of ask you, but in terms of priority, one is let's look at the learning needs, right? Our learner profiles have considerably changed. When you're talking 21st century, we know from 20 years ago, learner profile has changed. And one of the biggest changes has been attention span. And that's a huge change in the whole schooling system. And that's not just for students, for professionals. You're always on multiple devices while you're studying. And hence, what's been one of the biggest observations that you see in that kind of learner profile? Also, given that you're not a big endorser for external discipline, right? So you've kind of said one must have self-regulated discipline. However, there is this whole distortion of learning. The disruptions are pretty extensive. So I'm very interested in that, because in many senses, every learner today has become a special learner. There was a time when you could talk about students with less attention span as a special learner, but now you're seeing this is pretty much the problem that every learner is facing. So I'm very interested in that. Although my second question was around assessment versus stackable units for competencies, but I won't delve into that. For me, probably priority will be my first question. Thanks.
No, you're absolutely right, Kala. I think attention spans have reduced significantly over the last, say, decade or so, and especially during and post pandemic, and then during pandemic when students had complete freedom of being on devices all day, playing games and doing all kinds of things which no one could really track beyond the point. So absolutely, you're right. I think the solution to that is uh, is rooted in sorry, I'm getting feedback. Yeah, I think the solution to that is rooted in uh, having the right usage of technology at the right age. Appropriate usage is important. There's a lot of so for example, we barely have any technology usage till grade 4 or so, and then grade 5 onwards there is technology used, but it is controlled in school, and we also work with parents to make sure it is controlled at home. But there are limitations to what we can do with respect to home related and controls. So I think teenagers, I think, as you mentioned, adults also have a difficult time maintaining attention span, whether it is an online workshop, even a face-to-face workshop for that matter, or any such thing. I think all of us need to find techniques ourselves to deal with it, and therefore we need to be also teaching those techniques to students. So we do extensive sessions, especially once students are in middle school and beyond, on all the issues that they face. So procrastination monkey, if you've seen that video, we do workshops around that. We teach them Pomodoro techniques. We teach them how to schedule their day, including time for social media and playing games. So they need to have that, because if we just have one narrow thing, then doesn't help, especially with teenagers. They need to have those outlets. So it's a lot of conversation. Last 2-3 years, we've also started doing twice a week advisories with our students, especially the high school students. So speaking to them on a very regular basis, building that connect. So the advisors play a lot of games with them, have a lot of fun with them, to make strong connections, and therefore are able to then teach them all of these things. Because otherwise, we also know that teenagers are not very easy. I mean, they don't want to learn all of these things easily, so they don't take advice. But when you do it through all of these methods, they're far more likely to take up this. Now we've seen examples of students coming back and saying earlier they didn't make a timetable. 6 months down the line, they said, "Oh no, I need help in making a timetable for myself, a study timetable for myself back at home, because I'm not being able to concentrate." So those are the things that we need to do on a regular basis with. And I don't think there are any easy answers to this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vardhan. Neeraj, you can go ahead.
Yeah, excellent conversation going on, Vardhan. So, so my question is, like there are a lot of stakeholders who want to improve the quality of education. One of the stakeholders obviously is the school, parents are there, but there are a lot of other stakeholders like out of the school and like coaching institutes and online courses, etc. I know it's a bit of a controversial thing to talk about right now, but my like since you are somebody who has been in the education and has understood from the schooling system, if there are stakeholders who want to contribute and make schools or parents a part of it, what do you think is an approach which actually works on the ground? Because uh, it's like online courses are competing with schools. There are very good STEM providers who are creating excellent content, but they become more like vendors sometimes. So, what is it's a functional as well as overviewistic remark I want from you as to how the collaboration can increase, right?
I think it's a tricky bit simply because I mean and we meet a lot of people who've built fantastic things and want to be uh, as a school. I mean and we are still doing an international curriculum. We have a lot more flexibility, but most schools have very little flexibility in their regular timetable or in the number of units and subjects that they have to take up. So it is very challenging for them to bring it into the school timetable. And typically, if you have something fantastic, it is either going to take more time, or it is going to cost more, or it is typically going to be both. Now, for that, it is typically going to be now that becomes a proposition which most schools stay away from because, well, time and money is both, I mean, a big challenge for them to carve out. So, unfortunately, a lot of this happens after school. The experiential learning or critical thinking workshops or all these kind of things are happening after school. Now, in reality, they need to be part of the uh, core curriculum for students, and they need to be doing it on an ongoing basis. I mean, your students are learning tons and tons of content which is meaningful. Well, they could be learning skills and attitudes which will be far more useful for them. So I don't have an answer for you in reality. What I can say is that there are many more progressive schools which are open to doing this nowadays. So you have to work deeply with them and build that curriculum alongside the schools rather than trying to do it independently of the schools. Now that also works, but it has its own limitations, as I mean, I'm sure you would know. So if and because especially I think in tier one, even tier two cities, there is a lot more competition for progressive schools. So schools also want to show these things as USPs. The only thing is that both the service provider as well as the school needs to have conviction in the idea, because the results of all of these things are not visible immediately. The results may take 2 years. Typically, they would take 5 years, 7 years. Now, that conviction has to be there because parents will only appreciate it after you can show those results in a slightly longer period of time.
And nobody wants to wait that long. That is what
That's
I have
true.
learned.
That's true. That's
Everybody
true.
everybody want. I
But
was talking to.
education has to be a long-term game. That is the problem and the beauty of it.
I was once talking to a bureaucrat. I still
Yeah.
remember this conversation a couple of
Yeah.
years back, I think, somewhere. And I asked him, why don't we invest in education? And I see a lot of investment happening in infrastructure and everywhere. He says that it's easier to showcase, right?
Absolutely.
And who will wait till 5 years, 10 years for a result to come out of an educational institution when you can? I mean, I'm not saying they need it. We definitely need that also, but definitely we need something in education also. I mean, that's the
No,
one
it's
way of
simple.
looking at it.
The election cycle is a 5-year cycle.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean,
And
it's
the
actually
faster
not a
risk,
5-year cycle. It's actually a 3-year cycle because the last
yeah,
2 years are all about campaigning. So, if you can't show results
yeah,
by that time,
yeah,
you would rather not invest there. So
yeah.
it
You know,
becomes a
Ankur, it's the same analogy, Vardhan and Ankur, for university recruitment. Why are you not investing in outreach and thought leadership and capacity building? And why
yeah.
are you investing in channel partners and agents? Because they
Yeah.
give you immediate outcomes. So that's just what it is, right? Like instant results.
That is what I've learned in life. I mean, I thought only few places that I worked in the past had this problem, but when I go around the world, the same problem exists. Instant gratification. All of us need instant gratification. I mean, I am investing so much, and then I need 2x, 3x, 4x, whatever now, not 2 years, 3 years down the line. That's the sad part of it. I mean, and we talk about, planting the seed, watering it, then the plant will come out, then the fruit may be coming out after 4 or 5 years. कोई सुनता नहीं है हमारी बात. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have one very important question. I mean, one of the most passionate person to ask this question, he is not here, but he has typed in at least 300 words for this question. So I won't write out everything. His name is Himanshu, and Himanshu is a independent international consultant, and he's a very passionate educator, passionate TOCN, and he was very excited that you are coming, and he was the first one to type in that question. I'm not reading out the whole question, but he says, I mean, in the current context, and he alludes to the issues at Harvard president resigning, and a couple of another Ivy League presidents were asked to resign, uh, and the whole situation around the war happening, and very polarized world that we are living in, where facts take a backseat and it's more about emotions and politics and everything. I mean, he says, what will be your advice to students in schools who are looking to go to universities or studying in educational institutions? Most of the time, the students uh, goalposts are related to job or a family, the near and dear ones. But as a global citizens, what is it that Vardhan will like to advise the youngsters that are going to enter university soon?
No, I think firstly, I think building. I mean, I want to connect, like, make it in two parts. And I think you had this question about what would be the advice to students for whom the revolution may be too late for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll
What can they
read
do if
that
they've
question
gone
out.
through?
I'll read that question out because, and that's one thing that good we can connect these two questions. I mean, I had mentioned what will be your advice to students for whom the revolution may be too late. I mean, we don't have a fountainhead in every district of this country. I mean, we have only it in Surat and maybe few other good schools, but not, as you said, public education it takes its own time. But how do we help these students? How do we ensure that they do not get shortchanged by the current education system that they have to go through with? So over to you.
So I think the good thing is, thanks to the internet, thanks to YouTube, now generative I think learning has been democratized. There is so much that students can learn on their own. Uh, and what they need to recognize is that the jobs of today, as well as if they want to do something on their own, require uh, deep skills, expertise in an area, plus you need to have so many of these general skills, whether it is leadership, teamwork, vision oriented, being able to focus, all of those things. That is what they should be developing. Their school, or most likely their college, may also not be teaching them if they're not going to a progressive school or a college, if they've not had the opportunity to go to one. But they have the opportunity to learn all of these things, and no one is stopping them. That I truly believe in. That no one is stopping them. No one can stop them if they take that responsibility and learn. There are online courses, service providers which will do that, but you can also do it at a very low cost, or at no cost. So I think, and they have to take on projects and challenges and internships, to really learn and prepare themselves for the world of work, rather than just aiming to get degrees which have very limited value, uh, even for the first job. Especially like if you're in, so many tech companies now are hiring on the basis of GitHub projects, and not on the basis of the degree, or your resume or your marks. So now that's not so easy to do in non-tech jobs, but it's going to happen more and more in that direction. So that's, on the part of being ready for the world of work. But as far as global citizenship is concerned, I think youngsters do tend to either be indifferent, or they tend to jump to conclusions very quickly, or take a side very quickly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think neither of those are helpful. To be global citizens, they have to really think deep, understand the issues deeply. Israel, Palestine, you could take a very quick, side and say that this is right and this is wrong. But in reality, I mean, it is a very, very complex and a very deep, long-term issue. I mean, it's been decades in the making. So students have to be advised, and they should be exposed to forums where they can understand all aspects. I mean, not just and deeply think critically about aspects, and not jump to conclusion, say that okay, he's right and they are wrong, or even saying something as simple as ki climate change is wrong and therefore we should stop using fossil fuels altogether. That's not going to happen, right? So
Yeah.
what's going to happen is things like the COP20 resolution that the COP28 took, small changes, but at least if it is in the right direction, and they can contribute to it directly or indirectly, that's the best that I think students can do.
Perfect. So I will take one final question because we have run out of time. Just a couple of minutes. And I don't know, tutor. I don't know your name. It's not there, but I'll take your question. What were the challenges, roadblocks that Vardhan faced while running Fountainhead School, and what is next in his to-do list for Vardhan? I mean, quickly, if you want to address
Yeah,
that.
I can quickly answer that. See, the initial challenges were about land funding, regulation. Although regulation is an ongoing challenge, but that was the initial challenge for sure. Once that was in place, I think it was then it was a learning journey. There were challenges like, okay, how do you build a high generation of high quality teachers who've themselves gone to very traditional schools themselves. So how do you do that? So we had to evolve our own training process, teacher training process for it. How do you convince parents about, I mean, the need for a progressive education? Again, we do a workshop with them, and it goes on and on so that they are in the right frame of mind. So I think those are challenges which were fantastic learning opportunities. I think today's challenges are not so much in terms of any of these, but it can be connected to the next step. What do I want to do next? And I think for me, the both the challenge and the interest is to be able to now make a difference at a bigger scale in whatever way possible. And the book is a big part of that initiative. So talk to as many stakeholders as possible. Try and bring about a change in the change in the mindset of people who matter, policy makers, decision makers, people who are working closely with schools and students. So that's my, I would say, broader next step. Within that, the exact nature of how things will work is something I'm still, it's a discovery process that's on right now.
Thank you so much, Vardhan, for that wonderful conversation. We really enjoyed it. I mean, as I imagined it, this has been better than that. Thank you so much on behalf of the Outreach Collective. I'd like to express my gratitude on behalf of the community, my co-founder, Bhakti. I mean, it's been an honor to have you here with us, talking about your book, talking about your viewpoints on education, and quite a few of other things under the sun. I have shared the Amazon link on the chat section for everybody who wants to order that book. It's an amazing book. I've already ordered my copies, and there were others who have already done that or started reading it. And I'm also shared my screen for people to just have a look at what the book looks like. And that's about it for us this evening. Thank you so much. We'll be back soon with another interesting personality and inspiring personality who is reimagining the way education should be, and what we all believe in, resonate with as a community. We will definitely look forward to having more of such conversation. Thank you, Vardhan. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night and see you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, TOC, for this wonderful session.
Thank you. Namaskar.